It's 4 o'clock. All right. So, good evening and welcome again to the series of webinars we are doing as part of the Better Bus Bengaluru campaign. This is a campaign with Bengaluru Moving, in which we are essentially focusing on the importance of making cities functional, making cities livable, making cities enjoyable, and making cities primarily busable. We have nothing against other forms of transport, but we would prefer cycling and walking more than driving your bikes and motor cars. Mostly because they make a lot of noise and generate a lot of smoke, but also it's an undemocratic, assertion of the right to the road more than others who cannot drive a motorbike or a car have. So in that sense, it's also about democracy, and how the road, to me, is the first major demonstration of what a democratic society would be like. In many undemocratic societies, it's not that the traffic is unorderly, and it in fact is more orderly, but that doesn't mean that the street is a space of celebration. It's a street in which fear, by and large, rules. So in democratic societies, the street is a space where the absence of fear indicates the quality of democracy. So you are allowed to express yourself. Your right to expression is guaranteed as part of your right to life. But your right to life should not be curtailed just because when you cross the road, somebody comes and hits you and you're finished. Or when you cycle, you just get knocked over. Or when you walk, you fall into a drain. You see, so that's the kind of intricate relationship we have with the city. So when I step out of my private space, which say my home, and step into the public space, which is the street, it doesn't belong to anyone, but it belongs to everyone. And so it's everyone's responsibility that everyone can actually move about and be mobile. So that's the theme of this webinar series. And we have had two excellent previous sessions. And today we are just about to launch into the third session. And I'm so happy to invite old friends and new friends to speak in this panel. So let me start off by first introducing our moderator for the evening, Mr. Satya Prakash Varanasi, a very well-known, I'm sorry, I've been signed out. Am I there? Can you hear me?
I can hear your voice.
Yeah.
Somebody just signed me out. These things happen with Zoom. I'm trying to check what happened. Okay. So if I'm audible and you can see me, that's great. So Satya Prakash Varanasi is a very well-known architect, not just an architect who was also keen on conservation. He's been a long-term member of Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage. Done a lot of work in Bhubaneswar, Delhi, and many parts of India, and especially in Bangalore, where I met him in the early 90s. And those conversations with him and many others, including Prem Chandavarkar and others, eventually ended up creating an organization called Civic Bengaluru, which is still alive. Satya from those days has always been one who promotes vernacular architecture, but also promotes a kind of idea of the city as a personable, not an impersonal entity. So when we asked him to kind of come in and share his views as well as moderate, it was, just like old times. Of course he would do it. Why wouldn't he, right? Thank you, Satya.
Welcome.
Yeah, and of course, when he speaks, you'll know what else he does. So I'll leave it to that. Ken Krukemeyer, see, I got the name right.
Yes, you did.
Yes. It's from Boston. Thank you for joining us from Boston. I mean, for me, Ken he came to Bangalore about 13 years ago, maybe. This was
13, 14, yeah. Couple times.
His partner, Barbara Connect, who is also an urban planner. Ken is an urban transport strategist. And they came as part of a study abroad program they were directing, and we were helping them here. And we walked on the boulevard of MG Road. And then we said, look, probably this is the last time you're going to walk.
Leo, we lost you. Leo, I lost you.
Somebody is muting me. Please don't.
Now you're back.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So this is the last time I said we're going to walk on this boulevard, and he said, why? And I said, this is where they plan to build the metro. And he said, I mean, in Boston, we worked to tear down elevated tracks. And if you have been to Boston, you'll see the Boston Braddock Park, which is about, it's several miles. And Ken has, uh, Ken, Ken as part, was part of the planning process in Boston. And what he did was, this is unbelievable for me because in the next few days, we are going to have a huge public hearing, just one on the 65-kilometer peripheral road. But Ken was talking to me about the number of public hearings he conducted on a street-by-street basis as Associate Commissioner of Massachusetts Department of Public Works. And he was also the project manager of the Southwest Corridor project. That is the one where they went to elevated corridor and they tore it down and put this wonderful, beautiful park there. So I said, you have that experience of having restored humanism in the city, and here we are making it, we are dehumanizing Bangalore. And yes, of course, he's now a founding member of Walk Boston, as well as having taught urban studies in MIT. So welcome, Ken, and thank you for joining us at 6:30 in the morning. We guarantee you good filter coffee from Bangalore, the best in the world.
This is my substitute. It's not as good as coffee with you, Leo, first thing in the morning.
Oh, thank you.
Should I proceed? Should I proceed, or do we want more? That's just an introduction, and we'll come back to each of our talks.
I'll just introduce the panelists together, and then
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please.
Dasarathi is an old friend, and we know Das because he cycled into the office literally and said, "Look, I got an idea." And he says, the way in which the city is being redeveloped or redesigned or re-engineered, it's going to make walking and cycling impossible, and we have to resist. So there was this man who would cycle all over town, and we were thinking like, we can't even walk, we dare not cycle because, you don't know, you leave the morning from your home to go to work by cycle, you have no guarantee you're going to get back. That's how dangerous the city was becoming. But Das is the Genghis Khan of Bangalore. He dares to cycle, and no one dare block him because he's been doing it for decades now. I do admit that I used to be a cyclist, but I am not as daring. Das is also an entrepreneur, and he's a local evangelist for cycling and walking in the city. So you can see him cycling around Malleshwaram quite a bit. Then we have Nandini. She is Regional Director of ActionAid, which is a development initiative across India, and she heads the regional office in Bangalore of Karnataka. Now, Nandini is an old friend and social activist, and any cause in which the vulnerable community is, any vulnerable community's cause, Nandini is there. And through the lockdown, she and her team have done amazing work in reaching out to migrants and basically everyone who walked. It's just amazing that when you take the traffic out, how many millions of people walked. I'm not advocating that they should have walked, but the fact that, they were forced to walk is a different matter. But this is how the cities were before, that most people walked, most people cycled, and a few drove. Now we have turned the thing upside down, and Nandini will come in and share with us her own experiences of navigating through this city. We are told Ms. V. Manjula, who is the Director of Directorate of Urban Land Transport, a very, very senior officer of the state, may join us. Being in our position, it's difficult to take time away for a lot of such useful conversations. But she said she will join us as and when she is free from other commitments. And for us, she has been one voice who has worked to, she's dealt with a lot of very important positions. But the one position I remember very well is when she was member secretary or commissioner of the Karnataka Public Lands Corporation. When she actually went and reclaimed much of the public lands, especially on the streets and so on, which had been grabbed. And so along with former Chief Secretary Balasubramaniam, they did incredible work in identifying, especially in urban spaces, lands which had been monopolized by thuggery, and reclaimed it. And our whole point of doing that was to ensure that there is more space for public use and more safety for public to use the public space. I hope she can join us. But we do have our colleague, Shamant, who is also an urban transport planner, I believe from Texas A&M University, and he has worked for about a decade with the Directorate of Urban Land Transport. And I know that he has, I have not met him personally, but I mean, I wish I could have met him, but lockdown prevents me from going, or this pandemic prevents me from going to so many offices. But it's great to meet you here, Shamant, and thank you for making time to step in, as also to introduce your own ideas of what we can do. So the theme today is fearlessly cycle, walk, and bus everywhere, making urban mobility infrastructure accessible to all. So this is the introduction, and on that note, I invite Satya to take over and moderate the session. Both Bhargavi and I are there to back you up. I also must say that those of you who hope to join us on Facebook, we're sorry. I think Mark Zuckerberg has blocked Zoom from connecting, and so we can't share it on Facebook. However, we'll download the video and upload it on YouTube and share it again. That's another way to do it, but you can't watch it live. However, what my colleagues Ashwin and Karthik are doing at the back end is to actually tweet the updates. So if you go to the ESG handle at E_S_G, you can actually follow, a report of sorts of this proceedings. So on that note, I invite Satya. Thank you very much for taking the responsibility to moderate. Over to you, Satya.
Well, Leo, anytime for ESG and for you, and also for the cause which we are looking at. It's a common cause. We all can share our experiences of cycling. I've also done my bit. Bus, I still do. Of course, pre-corona time I did. But anyway, see, one thing we realize when we speak to people, I've heard many people saying this. Very often people think the whole idea of the need to walk in a city, move in a city, and mobility issues, it's one of the traits of a city. So, and there are people who believe mobility is created. Mobility is created by the city. But then academically, when we studied, we realized it was in a way mobility which created the city. If mobility has created the city, and if people would agree with that kind of a position, then mobility has a greater role to play. Of late, yes, in some circles it is recognized in the name of TOD, Transit-Oriented Development, and I'm sure Shamant and Ken and Kukemir and all would be aware of it. But then even the so-called transit-oriented development has not come into the forefront of our larger urban development policies. So we still seem to be thinking that travel, traffic, transport, etc., is a byproduct of the city, whereas the reality is the reverse. So that's one issue. If you start with that, I just want to share, as a moderator, I'll just share two background thoughts for those who possibly might not have read about the overall theme. The panelists will anyway then elaborate it from their perspectives. But what I'm sharing is from my perspective to just to give a frame of reference. One from the design perspective and one from the administration management perspective. It's good to know that Kukemir has already come to Bangalore, but otherwise everybody else is familiar and you also would be knowing. And Bangalore is a very interesting city. It's a city of towns. We have Cox Town and Fraser Town and all kinds of towns. It's a city of Petes, Chickpet and Valepet and Chamrajpet. It's a city of Nagars, Jayanagar, and we have many. So incidentally, Bangalore is a very interesting city to study from urban studies perspective. It's a city of multiple cities, multiple city characteristics, which actually makes our job much more challenging. It's not very easy to administer this city. It's not very easy because of this. Of course, people may say, well, every other city is heterogeneous. Where do you see homogeneity? But the Bangalore's heterogeneity is different from the heterogeneity we see, let's say, in other Indian cities like Chennai or Kolkata, Bhopal or many other capital cities. This is the first issue. So as a design. So because Bangalore is already designed in a particular way, now trying to bring in safe mobility, travel, traffic, etc. pattern is not very easy. If we were to design a city fresh, greenfield, then it's more easier. So at this moment, how do we achieve the safe mobility we are talking about in an already built congested city? This is one point. Second, from the administration point of view, I had a chance to read the urban mobility plan. Oh, of course, Hemant is here. I'm sure he will speak more about it, the comprehensive. I mean, all this happened last year, when there was talk about Bangalore needs a mobility plan. Where is a comprehensive mobility plan? And then DULT worked on it, and I also had a cursory look at it. Now, today, this morning, I have gone through it very cursorily last time, but this morning I just scrolled through a couple of pages. At least, to confess, Hemant, I went through the executive summary part today mainly. And what was interesting was the list of abbreviations and the organizations, etc. I also made a quick list in my mind. We all know that Bangalore has had many agencies to look at the transportation issues here, which is fair enough. So we have had our, of course, besides VD and BBMP and master plan, we have had DULT, of course. RIGHTS was involved at one time. Right from our civic days, we have been hearing about RIGHTS, though it is not for road. Then there is ITDP, EMBARK, WRA, the World Resource Institute, the UNTAR. So there are many of these which are around. And there are many NGOs who have been talking about this. And when I saw this abbreviation list, there are so many organizations listed. So Hemant, maybe one of the issues which we may like to hear from you is this impossible challenge of putting together so many organizations together and arrive at a comprehensive plan which has to be implementable one day. So there's a big challenge. And these multiple agencies, we have been in civic issues and urban issues, we all know, multiple urban agencies and what they do to us. So I'll stop at this level, just referring about the whole issue from the design and from the administration point of view. And then let's hear from everybody, how are we going to face the challenge? We would, of course, first listen to Professor Ken Krukemeier about his experiences in the Boston and in the larger, I assume, American contexts, and what lessons we can bring home from his presentations. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Satya. I am really pleased to be here, and the stage that has been set, I think, is quite wonderful. And you mentioned that that Bangalore is a collection of villages is really something that I think may actually be key to the solution of the transportation problems in Bangalore. And we'll get to that in the discussion that we have. Let me now go to the screen here, which I hope I'm going to be able to do without problem. And play. Okay. Fearless cycle, walk, and bus everywhere, making urban mobility infrastructure accessible to all. What a wonderful dream, and is it possible? Let's talk some more about all that. The pictures in the background are a project in Brazil that I'll describe in a little while. We start with auto-centric thinking. That's where much of our transportation energies go today, and many of us who've been involved in making cities livable realize how far autocentric thinking has taken us away from the idea of thinking about people. It's the people in the automobiles and it's the people who are outside of the automobiles that we need to start talking about. This picture, a 1959 Cadillac from the United States, I got on an open road in Sweden, believe it or not. And some people think that autocentric thinking is just making the cars smaller, making them electric, making them something that fit into a smaller space than that big Cadillac. Here's Barbara with a bicycle, and it makes me tell you the story of talking with the transportation director of the city of Beijing. He had retired by the time I spoke with him, which was about 2005. And he said to me, we've got the solution for how to solve our transportation problems in Beijing. We need to get rid of the bicycles. I said, oh, really? He said, yes, because automobiles are so much smaller. And I said, wait a minute. No, here's a bicycle and this size and so forth, and a car is this big. How do you mean a car is so much smaller? He said, well, they go much faster. I think people in Beijing have learned that automobiles do not go much faster most of the day as they are stuck in traffic. And in Bangalore, a picture that I took, I think in 2006, and I don't imagine that things are much different today, although maybe there are still more cars and fewer people who've been scared off the streets, is a challenge to figure out how we accommodate automobiles in cities, or whether we even should. Because clearly the commerce, the activities, the economic things that drive daily life in this particular picture is not those couple of cars, it's all those people. Now, some people would solve the problem by doing this. We got a little space for the cars and we mark it all out, and then it's going to be really safe and delightful for those bicyclists. But that's really not where we can ever go, nor necessarily that we should. In this book that I have from Latin America, Ganar la Calle, share without dividing, capture the street. There's a quote from Francois Asher, who says a street must provide at minimum one of the three following functions: transit, the through movement; access, buildings and activities that line the street; and reception, a welcoming or gathering. I'd say that most streets actually ought to be doing all of those three things, and it is very hard to do so. With autocentric thinking, we tend to worry mostly about the transit, getting from here to there, through the street, along the street, sometimes forgetting about what's on either side, and certainly doing damage to the issue of reception. Let's see. Whoops, why is it? About then all the people who have a right to the street and how the street serves them in all three functions. It's important to consider how we deal with that, and that's what many of us transportation planners have been doing until January of this year. And since then, two things have come in the United States that I think are affecting people all over the world. First is the COVID-19, and second, in the United States at least, we describe the issues of being inclusive as Black Lives Matter. The killing of George Floyd that has brought this issue to the minds and hearts of really everybody in the United States in ways that we have not come to address in the past. And I think that we have to think about both of these things as we look toward a future, which is in August of 2020, very different than it was in January. What do we do now? And I would like to make the case that we need to learn how to make better use of what we already have. That isn't, as I show you in this picture in the Netherlands, just separating out every mode so that everybody's got a place to walk, a place to be on the river, a place for the bus on the street on the other side of the greenery, and a place to park and a sidewalk there that you can't really see.
One more quick thought before Dasharati comes online. You know, city is a very strange animal, as we often say. And it was, I think, Christopher Alexander and his team who said that people love to meet each other. People like to meet each other and talk to each other and work together. So the idea of the urban, the idea of the city evolves. But incidentally, it's in a city, we often don't find any time to meet each other because the city creates movement. But the very idea of trying to meet people, going and, and also the different kind of urban services, activities, we human beings working together. It creates a complex set and net. So there is a need to move. There is a need to connect. Okay, now because of COVID-19, we may not be. We are doing the webinar, but otherwise we need to move. The moment we need to move, which is very, very basic and fundamental, which we can't deny, naturally congestion starts, then of course, as it goes to different levels, congestion starts and pollution starts and all that. It is interesting to see the Chinese authorities saying, stop the cycles and have the cars. But Dasarathi still goes around on his cycle. So one way is to say, well, the city has to develop, but then we cannot let it develop to such an extent that, people move only in cars and other means so that the congestion and the pollution go up. So city has to progress, whereas the transportation, movement and traffic and transportation mode has to stay what it was earlier. Now, there's a contradiction in what I'm saying, Dasharathy, and I'm sure you will clarify it in your own way. So, there's a contradiction between the sociological need to keep moving and the way an urban problem gets created because we are moving. And the more and more people move, more and more problems. So, over to you, and I'm very eager to hear you out on this.
Yeah, then when you say the need to move, and if you have an automobile, your need to move is bigger. You want to travel longer distances, many times unnecessarily. And if you're walking or cycling, then your need to move is reduced. I mean, you move when absolutely necessary. So in that sense, it's
well said.
yeah. So yeah, that's one thing. And yeah, I've been actually cycling for the past 20 years now. I'm actually 60 years old. I started at the age of 40, and in fact, my daily commute is about 26 kilometers from here, from my home to the office. The one thing is that, people ask me, so how come, it's dangerous and how come you're still cycling and so on. I haven't had a single scratch in an accident in 20 years of cycling. And I estimate that I've cycled about 1 lakh. That is 100,000 kilometers. That's probably about twice the circumference of the earth, just in Bangalore alone, right? And few things that, I started cycling for a decade. I was cycling, and then I said, okay, I'm doing this, but why not open my mouth and start promoting this? And I was practicing, and then I said, okay, I want to preach. I want to get more people, using sustainable transport. The bicycle happens to be my primary mode of transport, but the secondary would be bus and auto and taxi and so on. Tertiary is a car. I don't own a car. I don't have a private car. It's about more than a decade since I sold my car, and I don't find the need to even own a car. Yeah. So, as a user of the city's sustainable transport infrastructure, whatever little there is, I just have I thought I'd use this forum to also, because various people are there who might give me an opinion on this and make some motion or movement on this. There's some course corrections that I wanted to also recommend. So when we talk about cycling and the necessity for cycling infrastructure, what has been done with in Bangalore, you have those footpaths in what is called the tender shore roads, right? We have the tender shore roads, and there what we've done is you expect the cyclist to use the pedestrian way. You expect the cyclist to use the footpath. It is dangerous for the pedestrians, and it hampers the cyclists. So you actually need to give space from the road, not expect cyclists and pedestrians to share the footpath. And two, we need trees. Cyclists and pedestrians need trees. Whereas, maybe cars don't need trees. People are sitting in the air-conditioned little bubble in the car and so on. So this is one small course correction, that please do not expect cyclists and pedestrians to share the footpath. That's a wrong design. I have used what I'm expected to use now. You got these bollards on the footpath, and then you got these big spaces, and cyclists are expected to go through the big spaces. It doesn't work, right? Two, talk about this thing about our concept of non-motorized transport in Bangalore. We consider ourselves to be, so for a very long time, we've been saying that we want to be a world-class city, Nobody knows what a world-class city is, but typically what it means is that you have big fat cars, a big fat metro, a lot of these big fat things consuming big fat resources, essentially, right? In terms of money, in terms of energy and everything. So when we say non-motorized transport, we only think of, bicycles or walking. Why aren't we looking at cycle rickshaws? Like, for example, in Delhi, the last mile transport from the metros and from bus stops is the cycle rickshaw. We somehow think it is infra-dig or demeaning to have human-powered vehicles. So cycle rickshaw is a beautiful way of it. Gives employment. It is non-polluting. Two is why have we forgotten about animal-powered vehicles? Why is animal-powered infra-dig in a city? Why can't we, like in the, we used to coexist in villages and in small towns with animals. Why can't we coexist with them in big cities again? So, as an example, I've been thinking, Avenue Road, supposedly, it's a very, what Ken was showing was kind of, a situation like that. You have huge masses of people coming there for their shopping, and then you got this big fat car suddenly coming and completely disrupting the, all the humans there. So why not block it to all automobile traffic, only non-motorized? So no automobiles allowed. This is an idea for DULT to think about. So 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. no automobiles allowed. You have cycles, but there is, since it's a shopping district, you have a lot of movement of goods. So you have human-powered carts, the push carts you can have. And you can have little animal-powered, the smaller ones. Even animal-powered, you got big, you got small, right? You got bullock carts, which are really big. You've got little donkey carts, which are small. So we need to get all this back and forget about this nonsense of world-class city must not have all this. It's retrograde. We're going back, a few decades. No, we are going forward, right? So this is one thing. And the third is, we, for a long time, because I have been trying to, also be in the thing of persuading people to move to sustainable transport and so on. And what I really found was that as a city, when we make systems and we expect people to use those systems, there are two things that we need to think of. One is persuasion and two is enabling. Bangalore traditionally has been, doing a lot of enabling. We forget about the persuasion. I enable people to cycle. I enable people to walk or take a bus. I can put in 50,000 buses. Today you got 6,000 buses. Let's say you put in 15,000, okay, buses. But unless I persuade people to get onto those buses, that whole thing is going to be a failure. We got a classic example of, in Jayanagar, we made 5 kilometers of beautiful cycling tracks with, bicycles painted there and, red lines and so on. We enabled cycling. We didn't persuade people to cycle. That is a problem. And the whole thing just failed. So when cyclists don't use those lanes, they don't take ownership of those lanes and keep away the automobiles crawl back. Creep back, let's say, into that space. So both these, whatever we do in terms of you want the city, or not only Bangalore, any city, for example, you need to, both these have to go hand in hand, persuasion and enabling. We keep looking up to the Netherlands and particularly Amsterdam as the cycling capital of the world, the mecca of cycling, right? But there, it didn't, in the 1970s, I think early 70s, they had about, in the Netherlands, they had about 500 children dying in 1 year on the roads, in road accidents, 500 children. And about 3,000 adults. Nobody cared about the adults. Or 3,000 adults dying, it's fine. But 500 children dying, people said, man, that's horrible. It's like, hitting you right there on your heart. So they started this movement, Stop This Child Murder. In Dutch, there was an equivalent, but in English, it was Stop This Child Murder. And it from then on it took off because it became a very emotive thing, right? It was very emotional for people. So that really took off, and then Netherlands really became what it is now. It's like the mecca of non-motorized and sustainable transport. What are we doing in Bangalore or any other city with all these vehicles? We are actually killing children. We're not killing them on the spot on roads instantaneously. We're killing them very slowly, not very slowly. I mean, quite fast, but yes, through pollution. Children actually, their lung development is retarded. They're actually dying of cancer. You see pediatric cancer wards with lung cancer, right? That's something really horrible, caused by adults and their addiction to automobiles. So we should use this and say, okay, we are killing our own children with our addiction to automobiles. Use this as an emotive issue. We need to persuade people to get on to sustainable transport. So these three little course corrections in what we're doing in going towards sustainable transport I had. So in some, one is, when we think of cycling, don't, share space with pedestrians. Two, non-motorized transport, why not animal and human-drawn transport? And three is persuasion plus enabling, not merely enabling. Always have persuasion go hand in hand with enabling. And start an emotive movement for this. So,
well, I wouldn't say that these are regressive measures. Also being part of heritage conservation as a movement, and when I went to England to do my master's in heritage conservation, the way they were trying to retain everything of the past, including some old compound wall, and here in India, we were trying to demolish everything and building new building. So it opened up the eyes to say that going back in times is not really regression. For that matter, in sustainability discussion, some of you may be also aware. Now, many people are saying that we need to go back to the 1950s and 60s and live that lifestyle. Otherwise, we may not have a future. There's some very interesting radical thoughts there to hear from you, trying to suggest, when Kolkata and all are trying to ban the cycle, the manual pushing and cycle rickshaws, you're trying to say, yes, why not? And there are some advantages. I remember having traveled a lot on cycle rickshaws when I used to work on the Banaras Ghats in Varanasi, which is a city of cycle rickshaws. Though I don't know now what's the latest scene, but still they are there after our Prime Minister became the MP of the city. So thank you there. Krukeme, by any chance, are you back with your technical? No.
I hope that the technical problems are solved. We'll see. I've tried saving the document in another form on preview, and we'll see whether we can get it and see it. And right. I am afraid
if that's the case, I'll request you to take over again instead of going to Nandini from Action Aid. So we'll give.
Wait a minute. No, we want to be this one. Okay, keynote. Okay, so we're going to proceed. Nope, that was the wrong way to do it. Sorry, I'm going to stop the sharing and go back. And I thought we had it, but another minute. Don't want to leave. Sorry.
And if you send it across to me, I could try and do it from my end.
Let me try to do, I'll try to do that. I don't know, quite understand.
Yeah, Leo, that's a good idea. If you can mail it across to your Google Drive.
Or email or WhatsApp, whatever. Okay, we should move forward and bring Ken back.
All right. Shall we do that then? Okay, yeah. So we move on to the next panelist, Nandini. Nandini, should we do it bilingual or what language you prefer?
Dasarathi, come again?
I asked you, do you want to speak more in Kannada or more in English?
ನಾನು ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೇನೆ.
Kannada. All right, then I'll just give a background to the others. So Shaman and Krukemer and Satya are already listening, and also all the other listeners here around. So Nandini prefers to speak in her mother tongue, which is something which we all believe in. Even I, however much English I have now learned to pick, I have picked up I picked up English language all along my life, because initially I was not into English language. I studied in Kannada, my local village language.
Right.
And
Same here.
only when I came to do my architecture to Bangalore was my real first proper exposure to speaking in English. But then you over the years you pick up. But then given a choice, even today I prefer to speak in Kannada. So whatever Nandini speaks, I will summarize it. Nandini, I may not be able to, do verbatim kind of a translation. But if there is anywhere you want me to do, what I can do is I can stop you at every maybe some 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, 10 lines, and then I can speak the essentials, or I can do also kind of a verbatim. What do you prefer? ನೀವೆಲ್ಲ ಎಲ್ಲ ವಾಕ್ಯಗಳನ್ನು ಹೇಳಿದ ಮೇಲೆ ನಾನು ಪೂರ್ತಿ ವಾಕ್ಯವನ್ನು ಮಾಡಲಿ, ಅಲ್ಲ ಕೆಲವು ನೀವು ಹೇಳಿದ
ಬೇಡ, ಸಮ್ಮರಿ ಮಾಡೋಣ, ಸಾಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ.
ಸಮ್ಮರಿ
I can be like I can be afford to be a bilingual also. Let me see.
It's up to you.
Yeah. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ವಿಷಯಗಳು ನಾನು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನೀವ್ ಹೇಳ್ದಂಗೆ ಮಾತೃಭಾಷೆ ಕಾನ್ವರ್ಸೇಷನ್ ಈಸಿ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಸ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ ನಂಗೋಸ್ಕರ, ಅದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ.
ಹೌದು, ನನಗೂ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. And for the benefit of all the listeners, I think we all regard Action Aid as a very, very highly committed, value-based kind of an international level organization, and they have been attempting to bring in economic, social, humanitarian justice wherever they are able to work, ecological justice as well. They have been able to bring in all these into our society, and it'll be good to have Nandini over here with us with their experience and how Action Aid looks at this issue today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Satya. Good evening, everyone, and it's a great opportunity to speak on the transport, the public transport that we are speaking, and Leo, Bhargavi, and all the friends who are into making it to happen, because it's become a forgotten history of the city, though the majority of the population depend upon the public transport facilities. Unfortunately, the urban planning and also the governance has not given that kind of a priority. So what I do, where Dasharthi has stopped, he was speaking about the importance of cycling and less dependence on the automobile. That's very important. But always the question comes, why are we behaving in which, how we are behaving now is a great question that we have to answer for ourselves. Is it the people fault, or is it a systemic fault? That's the great question that we have to answer. I try to begin my presentation with a poem recently that I've written just last week, because it speaks about what kind of a ideology that we are being constructed around us, and because of the ideological because of the ideology we are behaving in the way that we are behaving today. So maybe that Satya can translate this later. I'm not going to recite the whole poem, but only one paragraph of the poem, which speaks about the developmental paradigm that we are living in today. The title is ಕೊನೆಯ ಪೀಳಿಗೆ, ಪ್ರಕೃತಿ ಮಾತೆಯ ಕೊನೆಯ ಪೀಳಿಗೆ, ಪ್ರಕೃತಿ ಮಾತೆಯ ಕೊನೆಯ ಪೀಳಿಗೆ, ತಾಯ ಬಸುರನು ಸೀಳಿ ಮೊಗೆ ಮೊಗೆದು ಕುಡಿದರು, ಇಂಗದಿ ದಾಹ ತುಂಬದಿ ಹೊಟ್ಟೆ. ತಾಯ ಬಸುರನ್ನು ಸೀಳಿ ಮೊಗೆ ಮೊಗೆದು ಕುಡಿದರು, ಇಂಗದಿ ದಾಹ ತುಂಬದಿ ಹೊಟ್ಟೆ. ವಾಮನ ರೂಪಿ ಆಕ್ರಮಿಸಿಹುದು ಭುವಿ ಬಾನನು, ವಾಮನ ರೂಪಿ ಆಕ್ರಮಿಸಿಹುದು ಭುವಿ ಬಾನನು. ಆ ಪೋಷಣೆಗೈಯುತ್ತಿಹುದು ಜೀವ ಸಂಕುಲವನು. As a theory of the evolution, human being, we are the last generation. The kind of ambition that we have, and the kind of idea that we want to be, we are the supreme, we are the one who have to rule. When we have taken over the control over the environment, We are thinking everything from human perspective. So that is where we are destructing the environment, whatever may be, in terms of our housing, in terms of our transport, in terms of food, in terms of our lifestyle, everything. We only look from the human centric perspective. That is the problem that we are living today. I think we have to change the ideology in that sense. Otherwise we may not be able to get justice. ಎರಡನೇದಾಗಿ ನಾನು ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟೇಶನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನ್ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ, ಒಂದು ಹೇಗೆ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು 30-40 ವರ್ಷಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಆ ಬದಲಾವಣೆ ಆದ ರೀತಿ ಇತ್ತಲ್ಲ. ನಾನು ಚಿಕ್ಕವಳಾಗಿರುವಾಗ 40 ವರ್ಷ ಹಿಂದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋದ್ರೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಕಡೆ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ದು ಸೈಕಲ್ ಇತ್ತು, ಇದು ಕುದುರೆ ಗಾಡಿಗಳಿದ್ವು, ಅದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಆಟೋಗಳಿತ್ತು ಕೂಡ, ಆಮೇಲೆ ಬಸ್ಸು ಎಲ್ಲಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ ಬಹಳ ಮಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಮಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಬಸ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಓಡಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವಿ. ನಿಜವಾಗ್ಲೂ ಆ ಒಂದು ಸಂಸ್ಕೃತಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು, ಒಂದು ಬಸ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಓಡಾಡುವ ಅಥವಾ ಈ ಸಾರ್ವಜನಿಕ ಸಂಚಾರ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಅಂತ ನಾವೇನ್ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ, ಅದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಓಡಾಡುವಂತ ಒಂದು ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊಡುಕೊಳ್ಳುವಿಕೆ ಇದೆ, ಹಂಚಿಕೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಪ್ರತಿ ಮನುಷ್ಯರು ಒಬ್ರಿಗೊಬ್ರಿಗೆ ಇಂಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡುವಂತ ಒಂದು ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ನಾವು ನೋಡಿದ್ವಿ. ನನ್ಗಂತೂ ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಜನ ಫ್ರೆಂಡ್ಸ್ ಇದ್ರು, ಯಾವ್ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ನನ್ಗೆ ಬಹುಶಃ ಬೈ ವರ್ಚ್ಯೂ ಆಫ್ ಬೀಯಿಂಗ್ ಡಿಸೇಬಲ್ಡ್ ನಾನ್ ಬೇರೆ ದಾರಿ ಕೂಡ ಇದ್ದಿಲ್ಲ. ಮೊದ್ಲಿಂದ ಕೂಡ ಸಾರ್ವಜನಿಕ ಸಂಚಾರಿ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ, ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ನಾನು ಬಸ್ಸಲ್ಲೇ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಓಡಾಡಿರೋದು. ತುಂಬಾ ಸಂಚಾರ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಒಟ್ಟಾರೆ ನಾನು ತುಂಬಾ ಓಡಾಡಿರೋದು ಟ್ರೈನ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ, ಬಸ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತ್ರ. ಇದ್ರೊಳಗೆ ಏನಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಕೃತಿ ಏನು ಪರಿಣಾಮ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ, ಎರಡನೇದಾಗಿ ಮನುಷ್ಯರ ನಡುವೆ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯ ಸಂಬಂಧದ ಕೊಂಡಿಗಳನ್ನೋದು ಬೆಸೆಕ್ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾದ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಇವಾಗ ನಾನು ಪದ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳ್ದಂಗೆ, ಇಡೀ ನೀವು ನಮ್ಮ ಸುಖಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ, ನಮ್ಮ ಸೌಖ್ಯಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ಇಡೀ ಪ್ರಕೃತಿಯನ್ನ, ಜೀವ ಸಂಕುಲವನ್ನ ಹೇಗ್ ಬಲಿ ಕೊಡೋದು ಅಂತೇಳಿ. ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ಇವಾಗ ನಾವು ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಇತ್ತೀಚೆಗೆ ಗಮನಿಸಿದ್ರೆ ಮೆಟ್ರೋ, ದೊಡ್ಡ ಮಟ್ಟದ ಮೆಟ್ರೋ ಕನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಷನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಈಗ ಟೆಂಡರ್ ಶೋ ರೋಡ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ದಾಶರಥಿ ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಅವ್ರು ಪೆಡೆಸ್ಟ್ರಿಯನ್ ವೇನಲ್ಲಿ ಸೈಕ್ಲಿಂಗ್ ಓಡಾಡಬಾರ್ದು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಒಂದ್ ವಿಧಾನ ಆದ್ರೆ, ಎರಡನೇದು 1 ಕಿಲೋಮೀಟರ್ ಅಂತ ರೋಡ್ಗೆ 16 ಕೋಟಿ ಖರ್ಚು ಮಾಡುವಂತ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಎರಡನೇದು ಎಲ್ಲಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಗಿಡ ಮರಗಳನ್ನು ಕಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಇವೆಲ್ಲವೂ ಕೂಡ ಒಂದಕ್ಕೊಂದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಂಬಂಧ ಇದೆ. ಸಪೋಸ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಚಿಂತನೆ ನಾನು ಬದುಕ್ಬೇಕು, ನನ್ ಸುತ್ತ ಇರೋ ಪ್ರಕೃತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಒಬ್ಳು ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ರೆ, ಅಥವಾ ನಾನು ಒಬ್ಬ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ರೆ, ಅಥವಾ ಮನುಷ್ಯ ಜೀವಿ, ಎಲ್ಲರ ಜೀವಿ ಅಂತ ಎಲ್ಲರಂತೆ ನಾವು ಕೂಡ ಒಂದ್ ಜೀವಿ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ರೆ, ನಾವ್ ಈ ರೀತಿ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ನಮಗ್ ಮೆಟ್ರೋ ಬೇಕು, ನಮಗ್ ಕಾರ್ ಬೇಕು, ಆ ರೀತಿ ಯೋಚನೆ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. ಬಹುಶಃ ಇವತ್ತು ಇದೇನಕ್ಕಾಗತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಈ ಸಿದ್ಧಾಂತದ, ಮನುಷ್ಯ ಕೇಂದ್ರಿತ ಸಿದ್ಧಾಂತದ ಬಲದಿಂದ ಹುಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿರುವಂತ ಅಭಿವೃದ್ಧಿ, ಆ ಅಭಿವೃದ್ಧಿ ಪ್ರಕ್ರಿಯೆ ಬಂದಿರುವಂತ ಅದು ಪ್ರಮೋಟ್ ಮಾಡಿರುವಂತ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರೀಸ್, ಅವ್ರ ಲಾಭತನಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಇದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲವನ್ನ ಕಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೇವೆ ನಾವು. ಸೊ ಈ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಟ್ರೀಮ್ ಆಗಿ ಹೊಟ್ಟೋಗುತ್ತೆ, ಒಂದರಿಂದ ಒಂದು ಅಂತ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ನಮಗೆ ಮೆಟ್ರೋ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಆಗತ್ತೆ ಹೊರತು ಬಸ್ಗಳು ಮುಖ್ಯ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಅದ್ರೊಳಗೂನು ಬಸ್ಸಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಏರ್ ಕಂಡೀಷನ್ ಬಸ್ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಆಗ್ಬಿಡತ್ತೆ ಹೊರತು ನಮ್ಗೆ ಸಾಧಾರಣವಾದ, ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಜನರು ಹೋಗ್ಬೋದಾದ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಜನರಿಗೂ ತಲುಪೋದಾದ ಬಸ್ಗಳನ್ನ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಇದು ಈ ರೀತಿ ತಾಕಲಾಟಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಈಗ ನೋಡ್ತೀವಿ. ನೋಡಿ, ನಾವು ನಮ್ಮ ಆಫೀಸ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಮನೆಯಿಂದ ತಗೊಳ್ಳೋದಾರೆ 8 ಕಿಲೋಮೀಟರ್. ನಾನು ನಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ಬೋದು. ನಾನು ನಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗಿದ್ದೀನಿ ಆಫೀಸ್ಗೆ. ನನಗೂ ಸೈಕಲ್ ಓಡ್ಸಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ, ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ನಾನು ಸೈಕಲ್ ಓಡ್ಸಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ. ನಾನು ನನ್ನ ಸ್ನೇಹಿತ ಇಬ್ರು ಸೇರ್ಕೊಂಡು ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್, ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಇದೆ, ನಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಲ್ಲ, ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ 2 ವೀಲರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಓಡಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವಿ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಬಸ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ನಾ ತುಂಬಾ ವರ್ಷಗಳು ಬಸ್ಸಲ್ಲೇ ಓಡಾಡೋದು. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇತ್ತೀಚೆಗೆ ಏನಕ್ಕೆ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಪೆಡೆಸ್ಟ್ರಿಯನ್ ಆಗಿರೋ ಒಂದು ಅಂಗವಿಕಲತೆ ನ್ಯೂನ್ಯತೆ ಇರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಫುಟ್ಪಾತ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಈ ಹೆಜ್ಜೆ ಇಟ್ಟು ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಹೆಜ್ಜೆ ಇಡುವಾಗ ಏನಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗದೇ ಇರುವಂತ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿನ ಕಟ್ಟಿದೀವಿ ನಾವು. ಅಷ್ಟು ಬ್ಲಾಕ್ ಹೋಲ್ಸ್ ರೋಡ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ, ಇದ್ದಕ್ಕಿದ್ದಂಗೆ ಪಿಲ್ಲರ್ಸ್ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಡೋದು, ಇದ್ದಕ್ಕಿದ್ದಂಗೆ ಹಳ್ಳಗಳಾಗೋಗೋದು, ಹೆದರಿಕೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಎಲ್ಲಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ ಮೊದ್ಲಂಗೆ ನಾನು 30 ವರ್ಷ 40 ವರ್ಷದ ಹಿಂದೆ ಆರಾಮಾಗಿ ಒಂದು ಕಡ್ಡಿ ಸಹಾಯದಿಂದ ಎಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಎಲ್ಲಿಗೆ, ನಮ್ ಕಾಲೇಜ್ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ದು ಶೇಷಾರಪುರಂ ಕಾಲೇಜ್, 2 ಬಸ್ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಆರಾಮಾಗಿ ಹೋಗಿ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಡ್ತಿದ್ದೆ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಇವತ್ತು ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗ ಕಷ್ಟ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಸಕತ್. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಹೆಜ್ಜೆಗೆ ವೆಹಿಕಲ್, ಅದು ನಾನು ಅದೇ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು, ಇದು ಜನ ಬೇಕಂತ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದಾರೆ ಅನ್ನಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಒಂದು ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಇದನ್ನ ಪ್ರಮೋಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ತಿರಸ್ಕರಿಸ್ಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದು ನಂದು ಮೊದಲನೇ ಸಜೆಷನ್. ನಮ್ಮ ಒಟ್ಟು ಜೀವನ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರತಿ ಸಂಸ್ಕೃತಿಯನ್ನ ನಾವು ಕಟ್ಟಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ. ಇವತ್ತು ಮಾನವ ಕೇಂದ್ರಿತ ಸಂಸ್ಕೃತಿಯಿಂದ ಪ್ರಕೃತಿ ಕೇಂದ್ರಿತ ಸಂಸ್ಕೃತಿಗೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಥಾಟ್ಸ್ ನಾವು ಅಥವಾ ನಮ್ಮ ಸಿದ್ಧಾಂತ ನಾವು ಬದಲಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕು. ಆ ಸಿದ್ಧಾಂತ ನಾವು ಮಾತ್ರ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗಳಾಗಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಏನು ಪ್ರಯೋಜನ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಒಟ್ಟಾರೆ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಅದ್ ಮಾಡೋ ತರ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಮೊದಲನೇದು. ಎರಡನೇದ್ ನಾನ್ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಇಡಕ್ ಇಷ್ಟಪಟ್ಟಿದ್ದು, ಹಾಗೆ ಇವಾಗಿರೋ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಎಲ್ಲವೂ ಲಭ್ಯವಾಗಿದ್ಯಾ, ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಸುಲಭವಾಗಿ ಸಿಗೋ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೆಯಾ ಅಂತ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಉತ್ತರ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು. ಅಕ್ಸೆಸಿಬಿಲಿಟಿ, ಇಫ್ ಐ ಟೇಕ್ ದ ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಆಫ್ ಅಫೋರ್ಡಬಿಲಿಟಿ, ಅಕ್ಸೆಸಿಬಿಲಿಟಿ, ಆ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಎತ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಖಂಡಿತವಾಗಿಯೂ ಕೂಡ ಆ ರೀತಿಯಾದ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ನಾವು ಇನ್ನೂ ಕಟ್ಟಕ್ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ. ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಬಸ್ಗಳನ್ನ ತಗೊಳ್ಳೋಣ. ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯ ನಾವು ಬಸ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಓಡಾಡೋದು. ನಂಗೆ ಮುಂಬೈ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅದೇ ಟ್ರೈನ್ಗಳು, ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಮೆಟ್ರೋ ತರೋ ಬದಲು ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವಂತ ಲೈನ್ಸ್ ಗಳನ್ನ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟೆಂಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಅತಿ ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಖರ್ಚಲ್ಲಿ ಟ್ರೈನ್ಸ್ ಗಳನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದಾಯ್ತು. ಮುಂಬೈನಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಗಿದೆಯೋ ಆ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅದ್ ಮಾಡದೆ ಮೆಟ್ರೋಗಳನ್ನ ತಂದು ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ನಾವು ದುಡ್ಡನ್ನು ಖರ್ಚು ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ. ನಮ್ಮ ಮನಿ ಫಂಡ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ನಾವೇನ್ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ ಅದನ್ನು ಖರ್ಚು ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ. ಜೊತೆಲಿ ಪ್ರಕೃತಿಗೆ ಹಾನಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಬರೀ ಮರ ಗಿರ ಕಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದು ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಇವತ್ತಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಪ್ರಕೃತಿ ಮೇಲೆ ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಅತ್ಯಾಚಾರವನ್ನ ನಾವು ನಡೆಸ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ. ನಾ ಅದೇ ಪದ ಬಳಸಕ್ ಇಷ್ಟಪಡ್ತೀನಿ. ವಿ ಆರ್ ರೇಪಿಂಗ್ ದ ಇಕಾಲಜಿ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಬಸ್ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಕೂಡ, ಯಾಕೆ ನಾನು ಬಸ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಈಸಿಯಾಗಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಪಡ್ಕೊಳಕ್ಕಾಗ್ಲಿ, ಅದನ್ನ ಹತ್ತು ಇಳಿದು ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ಈ ರೀತಿ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಬಹಳ ಸುಲಭವಾಗಿ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಇವತ್ತು ಬಸ್ಗಳಿರೋ ರೀತಿ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ ಅದು ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಕ್ಸೆಸಬಲ್ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಫಾರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್, ಆ ಮೊದಲನೇ ಸ್ಟೆಪ್ಪು ಅಂತ ಏನಿದೆ ಬಹುತೇಕ ಬಸ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ 1 ಅಡಿ ಎತ್ತರ ಇದೆ. ಹೇಗೆ ನೀವು ಸಣ್ಣ ಮಕ್ಕಳು, ವಯಸ್ಸಾದವರು, ಅಂಗವೈಕಲತೆ ಉಳ್ಳವರು ಅದನ್ನ ಹತ್ತಕ್ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಅನ್ನೋದು ನಾವು ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಯಾವುದೇ ಒಂದು ನಾವು ಪ್ಲಾನಿಂಗ್ ಅಂತ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಆಗೋ ಹಾಗೆ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕೇ ಹೊರತು ಯಾರೋ ಕೆಲವ್ರನ್ನ ಮಾತ್ರ, ಬರೀ ನಾವು ಪ್ರಕೃತಿ ಅಂತ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಬಟ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಕುಲ ಬಾಂಧವರೊಳಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಎಷ್ಟು ಮಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಸಮಾನತೆಯನ್ನ ನಾವು ಉಂಟು ಮಾಡಕ್ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ. ಇನ್ಕ್ಲೂಸಿವಿಟಿ ಈಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್. be it children, person with disability, old age people, anybody for that matter, ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಆಗೋ ತರ ಹೇಗೆ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ಬಸ್ಸು ಹತ್ತೋಕೆ ವೀಲ್ ಚೇರ್ ಯೂಸರ್ಸ್ ಬರೋ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ, ಅಥವಾ ಕಣ್ಣು ಕಾಣಿಸ್ದೇ ಇರೋ ನನ್ನಂತವ್ರು ಕೂಡ ಹೇಗೆ ಆರಾಮಾಗಿ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಬರೋ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇರೋದು ಅಂತ ಒಂದನೇದು. ಎರಡನೇದು, ಅದೇ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ ಬಸ್ಸು ಅಂತ ಹೇಗೆ ಕಂಡಿಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಇವಾಗ ಭಾಷೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲದ ಬೇರೆ ಊರಿಂದ ಬರುವ ಜನ ಇದ್ದಿರ್ಬೋದು ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿಗೆ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಲ್ಲಿ ತುಂಬಾ ಜನ, ಲಕ್ಷಾಂತರ ಜನ, ಈ ಕೋವಿಡ್ ಬಹಳ ಒಂದ್ ಒಳ್ಳೇದೇನೇನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ನಾಡನಿಂದ ನಮ್ಮ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಿ, ಅದರಲ್ಲೂ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ನಮ್ಗೆ ತೋರ್ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದೆ. ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತಿತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮಂತವ್ರಿಗೆ, ಆದ್ರೆ ಜನರಲ್ ಪಬ್ಲಿಕ್ಗೆ ಕಲ್ಸ್ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರುವಂತ ಒಂದು ವಿಧಾನ ಅದು. ಆ ಭಾಷಿಕರು ಏನಿದ್ದಾರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಕನ್ನಡದ ಬೋರ್ಡ್ಗಳನ್ನ ಓದ್ಕೊಂಡು, ಅಥವಾ ಅದ್ರಾಗೆ ಸುಮಾರು ಜನ ಈ ನಾವು ಕಲ್ತಂತ ಶಾಲೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಕಲಿದೇ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಜೀವನದ ಶಾಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕಲ್ತಿರ್ತಾರೆ, ಆದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಓದಿ ಆ ಬಸ್ಸನ್ನ ಹತ್ತಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಅಕ್ಸೆಸಿಬಿಲಿಟಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಆ ರೀತಿಯಿಂದ ಕೂಡ ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ.
ನಂದಿನಿ ಅವರೇ, ನಂದೊಂದು ಸಣ್ಣ ಸಲಹೆ ಇದೆ. ನೀವು ಹೇಳಿದ ಮಾತುಗಳ ಪ್ರಥಮ ಭಾಗವನ್ನು ನಾನು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಅದರ ಮೂಲ ಏನು ಅಂತೇಳಿ ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಡ್ಲ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ. ಈಗ ಎರಡನೇ ಭಾಗದಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಕೆಲವು ನೇರವಾದ ಸಲಹೆಗಳನ್ನ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಿ. ನನಗೆ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯನ್ನೇ ನಾವು ಪ್ರಶ್ನಿಸಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು, ಅಥವಾ ಅಫೋರ್ಡೆಬಿಲಿಟಿ, ಎಕ್ಸೆಸಿಬಿಲಿಟಿ, ಬಸ್ಸುಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ, ಅದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಂತರ ಕೆಲವು ನಿಮಿಷಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ನಂತರ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು. ಆಯ್ತು. ನಾನು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಹಾಗೆ ಕನ್ನಡದ ಕವಿ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷಿನ ಕವಿಯೂ ಅಲ್ಲ. So you'll have to excuse me. I translate your poem, but I should say the poem was very well read. Anyway, what Nandini was trying to say, initially she spoke some bit in English, or I assume that some of you have been able to grasp what she said, of course, at that level. But subsequently, the poem is a very well written poem. She has written some, used some very good words. So primarily it says that, we, the human race, seems to be on some kind of an insatiable hunger. And to satisfy our hunger, whom are we going to? We go to our mother. And who is the mother? Nature is our mother. So she says that, we are trying to, of course, she used the word rape in a different sense later. So we are virtually trying to reap out every possible resource, every possible food, every possible way to, whatever we can get to feed ourselves. She uses it in a very, as a metaphor. It's not really food. It is a metaphor. Ingadi daha. So this insatiable hunger is not getting satisfied. It's a metaphor. And she says in the process, so my mother, who is pregnant with so much of, I assume is again a metaphor of resources. So Taya Basarannu Basidu. So you're virtually trying to slice into my mother's pregnancy and the basar. The basar is basically means fertility. So we are trying to virtually slice into her fertility, and we are trying to eat and drink and eat and drink, but still we are not getting satisfied. So she finally says that this is the last generation, Koneya Pilige. So she is now trying to say that there is this big thing, you can call it as I don't think you use the word struggle, but Jiva Sankulaಗಳನ್ನು ಆರೋಹಣಗೊಯ್ಯುತ್ತಂತ
ಅಪೋಷಣೆಗೊಯ್ಯುತ್ತದೆ. It's disrupting. Yeah,
the last generation of the ಕೊನೆಯ ಪೀಳಿಗೆ. So this last generation is aposhana means you virtually take it inside in a very symbolic sense also. So we are doing that to the Mother Earth, and of course she is basically trying to suggest which many of us are very worried about. Maybe Homo sapiens, humans, are on the path to getting extinct. We don't know. But there's a very interesting poem there, and there was, I think, it also sets a tone to what she said later. So then she speaks about her own memories from the last 20, 30 years, 40 years ago, how she could establish relationships and friendships around, despite being, well, she used the word disabled, but Nandini, we nowadays use the word differently abled and all that. But I don't think you're disabled, Nandini, in any way. Maybe you're saying it. But when somebody read this, is what actually I sent an email to Leo, Bhargavi, and Sana. So I wrote there that I became very proud of you. What you are calling as being disabled by your slight visual impairment, but despite that, what you have achieved is great. Keep it up. You are a beacon light for others. So she spoke about how, despite being slightly visually impaired, she was managing to navigate around, and how that kind of a navigation in the public areas is now becoming very difficult. So, there is one of the themes in this whole discussion that you are trying to today. There are many issues we want to look at. One issue was the first part where somewhere I mentioned, you also gave a basic, of course. We are trying to look at the whole city as a social phenomena, and then what kind of traffic movement we need to create, and where is the conflict between them. But another major issue to be discussed today is what actually Nandini is representing for the benefit of others. I'm saying it. So the whole idea of accessible, affordable mobility for the differently abled. How can we bring in equity and equality? And with her background in Action Aid, possibly you are one among the best, Nandini, to suit it, to talk about the need to bring about equality in the overall urban mobility systems around. You already been mentioning it very passionately in Kannada. As you rightly said, I could see that in Kannada your passion was coming through more. But when I translate, the passion will be lost. You got to bear with me.
Yeah.
So then she goes on to talk about why has this happened? Why the Bangalore of 30, 40 years ago is lost? She says, now today we are looking, of course, she also referred to the global phenomenon of the Homo sapiens, the human-centered development happening around. And these development models are not fair for anybody, which is something which is endorsing upon. And she says, today comforts and profits. She just used the word direct and indirectly again and again. So the comforts and profits have become the primary movers for our cities today. So from, even if you look at the bus transport, which she refers to, from bus, it becomes an air-conditioned bus. And then we look at the metro transport. So the whole idea is to look at a so-called progressive model. And this is to be questioned. Then, of course, she came to some very specific issues about her own experiences of walking in the city from 30, 40 years ago to now. So it was so easy to walk in those footpaths on the roads in those days when they were not designed, when they were not world class.
Correct.
When they were not anything. When they were the local kacha roads. Whereas today, with all the so-called designers, she says, I'm very apprehensive. There could be a bollard, there could be level difference, there could be something happening here. So these so-called designer features which have now come in, and I would agree with you, Nandini. Incidentally, my own comment about tender shore, I know people who are behind it to some extent, is that there has been to some extent a kind of a copy paste of European streets, not fully, but partly.
Yeah.
Copy paste of European streets. So in one, somewhere in some discussion, I said we have lost Indian street by doing these so-called tender shore streets. And one felt there was an opportunity to, Dasharathy also spoke indirectly, I know, or directly. We had a great opportunity of merging, synthesizing the European street with the Indian street, and we could have designed the street for the future. Somewhere I feel we have lost that opportunity. I've shared this thought a lot with my students, explaining in more detail, but today is not the occasion to do that. So then she came to her specific suggestions and reactions. She just started with them. Then I thought maybe I should paraphrase what she said till now. I'll anyway paraphrase two of them or three of them. One she said is the systemic issues. She was questioning, is this happening because of personal apathy or personal issues, or is it the public and the systemic issues? And Nandini very strongly feels it is the public and systemic issues, and we need to question what is happening today. Second, she said is about affordability and accessibility. And even the modes we are trying to suggest, we are not suggesting more affordable solutions. We are suggesting less affordable solution. Bus to AC, bus to metro. Metro is not cheap. And I've done a lot of travel on metro. Let me confess, I hardly see anybody from a so-called economically weaker section, anybody from even a lower income group ever sitting in a metro. And a lot of metro people, I'm sorry to say, I also see a lot of younger generation who are, I think, are earning well, software tech is included for using metro, because it is whatever. I also take metro. I am not a software techie though, of course. So this whole issue of, are we suggesting more affordable means, or are we suggesting less affordable means in the name of progression? Third thing she spoke about was about the whole of accessibility. And she spoke, of course, she gave a very specific example of the bus. Those who are differently abled, how do they climb a bus? Of course, there is talk about low floor buses. We have heard a lot of BMTC announcements in the media. But anyway, that's very far and few wherever we find. I know whenever I had to go to airport, now I don't try to fly at all. For my own ecological strange things, last 5-6 years, I hardly take a flight unless it's really, really necessary. But I know there are low floor buses there coming with the coaches, some of them. And then she talks about climbing to the bus and how do we read the bus numbers and related issues. So I paraphrase what she said till now. And Nandini, if the few more which you may have, if you can please share quickly.
Yeah. Thank you, Satya. ಬಹಳ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರಿ ಮಾತ್ರ. ಅದೇ ನಾನು ಅವಾಗ್ಲೇ ಏನ್ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಈ ಅಫೋರ್ಡಬಲ್ ಇದು ಅಕ್ಸೆಸಿಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಏನಿದೆ, ಅದು ಬರೀ ಪರ್ಸನ್ ವಿತ್ ಡಿಸಬಿಲಿಟೀಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ಲಿ ಏಬಲ್ಡ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ನಾಮಂಕ್ಲೇಚರ್ ಐ ಡೋಂಟ್ ಸಬ್ಸ್ಕ್ರೈಬ್ ಟು ಇಟ್. ದಟ್ಸ್ ವೈ ಐ ಆಮ್ ನಾಟ್ ಯೂಸಿಂಗ್ ಇಟ್. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮನ್ನ ಯಾವ ಪದದಲ್ಲಿ ಕಲಿತಿನಕ್ಕಂತೂ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮನ್ನ ನಡೆಸ್ಕೊಳ್ತೀರ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಆಗತ್ತೆ. ಸಮಾಜ, ನೀವು ಅಂತಲ್ಲ ಸಮಾಜ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಪರ್ಸನ್ ವಿತ್ ಡಿಸಬಿಲಿಟಿ, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ವಿ ಆರ್ ಪೀಪಲ್ ಅಂಡ್ we do have some physical disabilities. We need to accept that as a fact. It is a fact. So as a person with disability ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲ, ನಾ ಅದೇ ಅವಾಗ್ಲೇ ಹೇಳ್ದಂಗೆ ಬೇರೆ ಭಾಷಿಕರಿರ್ಲಿ ಅಥವಾ ನಮಗೆ ಶಾಲೆಗೆ ಹೋಗಿ ಕಲಿಯಕ್ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಇಲ್ದೇ ಇರೋರು ಇರ್ಲಿ, ಎಲ್ರನ್ನೂ ಗಮನದಲ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ನಾವು ನೋಡೋದಾದ್ರೆ, ಬಸ್ಸು ನಂಬರ್ ಬೋರ್ಡ್ ಇಂದ ಹಿಡಿದು ನಂಬರ್ ಇಂದ ಹಿಡಿದು ಮತ್ತೆ ಯಾವ
ನಂದಿನಿ ಅವರು ಸಣ್ಣ ರಿಕ್ವೆಸ್ಟ್ ಇದೆ, ಈ ವಿಷಯ ನೀವು ಈಗ ಹೇಳಿರೋ ವಿಷಯಗಳನ್ನು ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ನೀವು ಪುನರಾವರ್ತಿಸೋ ಬದಲಾಗಿ ಹೊಸ ವಿಷಯ ಇದ್ರೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಹೇಳಿ. ಏನಾಗಿದೆ, ಸಮಯದ ಅಭಾವ ಕೂಡ ಆಗ್ತದೆ. ಕಮ್ ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ ಟು ಫಾರ್ ಲಾಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಡಿಸ್ಕಷನ್ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ಸ್.
Okay. So we need to look at the accessibility question from children, aged, person with disabilities, and people who have not got the opportunity to study in mainstream schools. I don't want to call them as illiterate. That's why I'm using big sentences. So while we design our transport, we need to look at these communities so that we will ensure that kind of accessibility. Thirdly, the cost question, actually speaking, and as majority, the
You
major.
mentioned that already. Affordability you have mentioned, I think.
Yeah, affordability I have mentioned. Yeah.
Mentioned.
So, I mean, while we are promoting buses, definitely buses must be promoted because majority of the population in Bangalore, be it be the particularly if you look at it from the vulnerable community perspective,
Yes.
the buses are more accessible and more affordable,
Agreed.
and
Yes.
very much needed. It's a need of the hour. If
Okay.
you look at from the environmental perspective also, buses are very important, along with cycling, along with what Dasharthi was referring to,
Yes.
animal driven transport, cycle rickshaws, all those
No.
things. We may have to
Oh,
bring in those kind of an city transport. We need to transform our transport facilities from a big benefiting the
yes.
capitalists to looking from the common people
Yes.
perspective. Thanks
Incidentally,
so much,
Nandini,
sir.
some of these issues were also raised in the last webinar which ESG organized. This is the third one, the second one. And many people did agree with whatever you are saying. There are many people agreeing, including Shikha, the IAS officer who is now heading BMTC. She also did agree on many of these. And I'm sure DULT, I know we don't have the MD today with us, but Shamant, I'm pretty sure would agree. And the mobility plan they have done. But Nandini, you brought in a very different, interesting perspective. I should also congratulate Leo and Bhargavi and Sana and whoever else, Karthik and others who are part of ASG and bringing together this kind of a diverse group. It's very interesting to have an expert from abroad and somebody who's into cycling and promoting it, you from your strengths. I won't call it as a weakness, just like you from your strengths, what you've done. It's also important when we are looking at any kind of a discussion of this kind, the whole society should be represented. And the Krukeme, we will come back to him, but before that, we'll try to hear Shamant. So the administrative, well, there's one person missing in this panel discussion is a politician. Anyway, ideally speaking, politicians, administrators, people, and experts, and I have been saying it for a long time, the ideal scenario for urban development is they are the four pillars of ideal city development: people, politicians, administrators, and experts. So we don't have people, we don't have politicians in this Leo, everyone else we have. All right. So we have an expert in Shamant here, and we already have heard about his background. So Shamant, before you start, I just want to say something very briefly. As I said, I'd gone through the report of DULT long time ago. I have a few little questions which I'll come back later on as a moderator to ask you. But if you can suggest from a positive point of view, what are the issues that has already been achieved and maybe what can be achieved? Since you said you don't have a PPT, I hope it can be. And with the background, I'm sure it can be really impromptu. Hold on. Leo is raising his hand.
No, I was just saying we are having a politician later in the coming sessions.
Oh, okay. Oh, Soumya, BJP, sorry, the Jayanagar MLA.
We are also trying to get the mayor.
All right. But that's the best actually. And unless these four pillars of a city don't come together, nothing happens. Experts keep talking, people keep creeping, administrators keep saying that my hands are tied, and politicians are on their trip. Well, Shamant, over to you.
Sure. No, thank you so much for having me in this forum. And I'm also very happy to listen to all of them. And I only see a sort of a coherence. Everybody is talking about the same thing, whether it is Ken or Dasharati, Nandini. So we all, asking for the same things. And I've been on other forums also where, I don't see that the quest is all the same, right? We all want a sustainable system. We want a good environment. And if you look at all the policies that has been developed in India, whether it's National Urban Transport Policy, all the guidelines that exist, they all talk about the same thing. But somewhere I feel they're not able to achieve that, as quickly as we want to be there. And I really don't know at this point of time, where is that, we are, what is stopping us from getting there. So that is, my first observation. Second thing is, while yes, I do agree, when we talk about sustainability, there are different forms other than cycling and walking, as Mr. Dasarathi was, telling that we can have animal driven and all. But the first question I would like to ask myself and others is, why cities have been formed in the first place, right? It's because of economy. When for economy to thrive, we need cities which are dense, which are where people can do business much easily, quickly. They can move about from one place to another, quickly. So all these things drives for us to have cities. Otherwise, if we didn't have that ambition, then I think we would all be living in villages. I think most of us who have been in Bangalore in the 80s and before, we know how Bangalore was. I think it was a very nice, calm village, I would say, rather than a city. But things have changed, and we're now moving into cities, which I feel many other Western countries also have moved into. Before we talk about the comprehensive mobility plan of DULT, we should also take a look at the draft revised master plan 2031 of Bangalore. Today we have more than 10 million population. Somewhere, what you say, the unofficial statistics says it's about 11 million. And what we are projecting for 2031 is 21 million. So which means we will have twice the Bangalore sitting in the same area that we have. So we're going to have more densities, lot more activities. So we're going to bring the same amount of people who are here in the next 10 years to be sitting in the same area. So what do you expect out of this, and how do you mobilize people, and how do you keep the economy thriving is a sort of a challenge I would like to pose, because while we think of, I'm certainly a very big proponent of sustainable mobility and sustainable cities, but also somewhere we require to balance between development and sustainability. So that's a question. I don't know how many of people living in Bangalore want to go back to a village kind of a lifestyle. How many want to go much more into a developed city kind of a lifestyle? So somewhere, how do we balance these two ambitions is something we have to sort of brainstorm, is what I feel. So that was my sort of second point. The third one I wanted to talk about is on what has come up as affordability. Should we have only buses or metro? On one hand, we are talking about reducing cars. If we don't provide public transportation for the people who can afford a car, then we cannot take the cars out. So they also have to be, when we say inclusive, there has to be planning for, the so-called highly or high income, high affordable citizens, as well as for people who probably cannot afford as much. So they also require certain sort of mobility. And I would not say the current bus service that we have is the most affordable. We have seen there are many garment workers who really cannot afford even the current normal services of Bangalore. That's why we have a lot of ad hoc services or unregulated services where we see, all these factory workers, they are moved in as if they're a sheep or a cattle, in cargo vans, which are very unsafe. So I feel it's sort of a, we need to look at various classes of people, and we need to plan for everyone and try to be as pragmatic as possible, hoping that in the due course we would be something like, unfortunately, I don't know if we can achieve the kind of densities that exist in Netherlands or in any other countries, Western countries, but hopefully try to get somewhere the kind of quality of life they have in those countries. That's my view on these. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to take.
Yeah, there would be. As we go along, I'm pretty sure there'll be people asking, and we are also going to engage all of ourselves in a discussion dialogue as we go along. Shamant, I think what you mentioned does come through in terms of a wish statement saying, yes, I think everybody Somebody may talk about a safe walk on a footpath, or somebody may say cycling, or somebody may say something else. But you're right, the fundamental intentions are the same. The only one of the big issue which today most of us are going to question is about this, the private, in a city development. This also comes through in the note which, incidentally, Leo and Bhargav have written a very interesting background note to it. Congratulations. There also it comes, the whole conflict between the public good and the private benefit. And we all do know that, of course, those of you mentioned about those who can afford a car will buy the car, and those who can't, we have to provide for them. But there are people who are questioning, well, they may be able to afford a car, but then all those who can afford a car, should we let them buy a car? Because it has a lot of other implications. The private car, of course, will provide speed and comfort and whatever else, freedom of certain kind. But we know that the public transport and whatever is to do with the public would mean much better health for both the city and people. Leo in the background note also speaks about it. There will be reduced congestion, there's more safety. One of the key issues we are trying to look at today is safety. Then there is, of course, ecological benefit. People will be saving money, public family savings, and the kind of government tax money which is being spent will be spent on more equitable distribution of benefits. Incidentally, you were mentioning about the cattle and all that. I'm sorry. I have done those kind of travel. In some areas, there is no proper bus service. I can quote where it is. From my office to Yeshwanthpur railway station, I had to do a lot of frequent travel. There were not enough buses, and I wasn't planning to take auto rickshaw or a taxi, and I would hop into the so-called tempo travelers. In one of those 8-seater, there will be 15 of us crammed inside. I've done a lot of such travels around, even in Bangalore. And even buses. Though sometimes people look at the bald head or the white beard and they give a seat. But at least on 1/3 occasions, with all that big crowd there jostling around, I have stood in that and have traveled. Even as recently as last year, before Corona, I have done all this travel. Now, the reason I'm saying this is, other day in the second session, Geetam Tiwari made a very interesting comment, which Leo can recollect. She said, most of these traffic policies seem to have been done by car owners. So they don't realize what people don't own the car go through. So we have to experience all this. You should go in a crowded tempo traveler, doing all kinds of modes, and then we know what the travel thing can be. But I'll come back to Dr. Mayor and hope he's now back with these slides. If not, maybe at least with this, I'm sure he can talk it out. He can talk out his experiences. And now we have a larger role to play here, unfortunately. Now, we have heard of all these Indian scenarios, people who have been living certain kind of life and the aspirations, which very rightly Shaman said. If you were to do a survey of these, people in India and ask them how many of them want to go back to village, and the number of people will be very small, maybe. So the very idea that, city is an engine of growth and all that, which we keep hearing. Now, where have we got it from? Sorry, I'm not doing any America bashing, but we all know that in the post-globalization, in India, of course, 1990 onwards, and the way the whole world changed, the GATT and all of them happened around World Economic Forums and of late the internet generation. So we know that India is on the same path, the same route as many other nations are. We can't escape it. We cannot avoid urbanization. So having said this, now knowing that you in the West, sorry, when I say you, I don't mean to say you as Ken Krukemayer, the West has already gone through this, and now we seem to be following the same path. So what kind of, if you can show slides, fantastic, but if not, maybe if you can share your experiences and share with us in what way your context has been now in a way, I think, trying to go back and discover the new meanings in the past.
Satya, thank you for that. I'm not going to show slides right now. Maybe if we want to continue a little bit longer, I don't know, we'll go back to some slides, but I've heard several things said that really strike home, that I really agree with. And so I'd like to reinforce well, thank you. I see we can see the slides. I'd like to really reinforce some of the things that have been said. And I do that in terms of getting transportation planners who thought with the coronavirus that, oh, well, now we're going to get to do all the things that we wanted to do. We're going to be able to put aside those streets and let people sit there and sit in restaurants. And we're going to be able to get the bike paths and so forth because there aren't so many cars. And the Black Lives Matter concern that has come to people's minds broadly across society in the United States is that there are a whole lot of folks who are left out of that equation of let's just turn over the streets to people sitting there eating in restaurants, because the essential workers in the United States are still having to get to work. And so if they can't get there because there are people sitting in the restaurants, then we haven't really solved the problem, and we haven't solved it equitably for everybody in the United States. I go to what Nandini was talking about how do we actually be sure that we are respecting everyone in society. And I think that the United States is maybe beginning a little bit to understand that need. And so many of us transportation planners who are trying to do what we have believed is the right thing are being accused of trying to solve white man's agenda, white man's transportation. It's the transportation of the car. It's this orientation, auto orientation that I started out with by that Cadillac driving down the open road. And so I've also heard some interesting things said. I was listening on another transportation and equity conference. No, really, it wasn't equity at all. It was about transportation and environmental sustainability. And a real estate man from India was part of that conference. This is 2 months ago. And he said, we are going to have to solve this getting people by cars to the office because the high-tech companies in the United States, they want us all here in India to be working in the office. And so we're going to not be able to do working from home. We're going to all have to be here in the office. So that's the people at the top as well as the folks at the bottom who are cleaning the office who've all got to get there. I think that maybe that's really setting us up on the wrong path for sustainability. I gave a talk in Sao Paulo just 2 days ago. I would love to have been there, but I wasn't. It happened to be warm here and cold there. But in any case, that's a city that's already at 21 million, just like Bangalore someday may become. And they can't solve their transportation problems. They see things as being 3 hours to get to work and 3 hours to get back if you're poor and living on the periphery. And people are beginning to talk about, why don't we have all of the things that people need in each of the parts of the city rather than believe that a central city is going to work the way Sao Paulo did 40 years ago or the way Bangalore did 40 years ago. And so that brings me to thinking about let's see, Das, I think you were saying the idea of a city as being something that, excuse me, the idea of a city as being something that is a collection of villages is something that we need to start listening to. Satya, you said that Bangalore is a city of towns, or maybe was.
Maybe you would need a little, can I just one small, yeah, it was not really villages. There were villages, okay.
Yeah.
But they all became, they became what we call as urban villages. They got urbanized.
Yeah.
But the reference was about Bangalore city being an amalgamation, a conurbation of multiple neighborhoods of different characteristics.
Yes.
By chance, if you have heard Jane Jacobs' analysis of American cities, or even the Paris, or even London boroughs, we notice there is more homogeneity within the districts, within the regions, within the neighborhoods of the city.
What I'm wondering about is if you can
In
take
Bangalore,
advantage.
it's very diverse. Yeah, over to you.
What I'm wondering about is if you can take advantage of the personableness of the connections among people when they are looking each other in the eye and thinking of themselves as a small subset of the larger city. And if each of those smaller subsets were places that had the schools that you need, the medical services that you need, the clinics, the markets that you need in order to get the food that you have to have, the jobs, distributing the jobs that are now all concentrated in the high-tech corridor, but by electronic means into locations that are spread out around the city, then we might be solving the mobility problem by increasing accessibility and actually reducing the need to travel long distances to get from where you live to where you work and thinking of the city as a whole. And so I'm wondering whether the kinds of things that are being successful in car-dominated places historically, like Europe, take Denmark, take the Netherlands, where they have gotten beyond the car and have started to really make sure that every village has the butcher and the bakery and the school and the clinic and the church, all those things before anybody's even allowed to live there if they're building a new place, and the bus that gets you into downtown for the once a week that you need to do that. If that kind of thinking about how land is used, how people look each other in the eye, how everyone is responsible. This is part of an idea called shared space that is spreading in Northern Europe. Everyone is responsible when they enter that space, whether they're walking on a bicycle or driving or in a bus, to make sure that everybody else who's already there gets home safely that night. That they have to give way to the person who wants to cross the street, have to acknowledge the fact that somebody is there selling things that people need to buy. And I think that maybe the ideas that we're talking about, can we go back? No, but can we go forward in a way that is respectful of everybody, that we're not just trying to solve white man's agenda for the way we think about transport, but think about the needs of everybody, not just in terms of transportation, but in terms of access to daily needs, and trying to decrease the need to move rather than increase the need to move by concentrating the diversity of all the things that are going on in a city. And doing that by getting to, as Das said, persuasion in addition to enabling. I think that that's really critical. I'm going to refer to a couple of books. This one by David Engwicht, an Australian, called Mental Speed Bumps. It's trying to get people to go slowly by putting your dining table out in the middle of the street and going out and eating there in the evening with all your neighbors. Maybe you're not going to do that in India, but maybe the fact that these folks in this picture here in Vietnam were able to play badminton in the middle of the sidewalk at a time that was rush hour, people going home, is the idea that we can have temporal uses, the times that you deliver the stuff to the stores and the times when access to the stores is the people who are there who need to shop and who would be upset by the car that takes away their space to get from one store to another. Another book that I think is really worth referring to is from early in the 2000s, Eduardo Vasconcelos. Urban Transport, Environment, and Equity is a story about developing countries and thinking about the importance of buses, which I really do believe in, and the hazards that are created by automobiles. His work in Sao Paulo has certainly not solved the problems in Sao Paulo, but nevertheless, I think his seminal thinking So I come back to the book that I was pointing out earlier, Seizing the Street, and thinking about how it can serve all of the needs of people, not only the through movement, but the access and also the welcoming or gathering. Good grief, could we imagine our streets again to be the welcoming place? Maybe it'll happen with autonomous vehicles, because if they're programmed not to run over anybody, I'm thinking I'm just going to send the kids out into the street and tell them play ball. And then the cars autonomously will just have to stop, and they'll have to wait till the game is over till they can get by. Anyway, those are some thoughts. We can show some slides later on, but I don't want to stop the discussion. I think there's some really wonderful ideas that are going on here.
Thank you very much on sharing your experiences from across the world. It was interesting to see on the Hanoi footpath people playing badminton. We are also doing all these in India to some extent in our own little way, playing on the streets. So,
and their tree's still there. They haven't cut them down yet to widen the street, although maybe because that picture was taken now 10 years ago, I would not be at all surprised if the, again, I'm going to call it white man's transportation, hasn't taken over and cut down the trees and widened the road.
you never know. You know, many things that we crib about Bangalore, of course, we have lost it, we say. Some of them are still, oh, are you continuing with some more slides? What is this now?
Well, yeah, this next series is
Okay.
one interesting case of taking over a slide. This is some work that we did now 8 years ago that has not actually come to pass. So it's a story of hopes, not realities. In a poor neighborhood that's still within the city of Sao Paulo, but yet it takes at rush hour 2 hours to get to downtown Sao Paulo, where many people work, and where, in fact, if you were doing it in non-rush hour, you'd be there in 20 minutes. Go to the next slide. What we did was we had a lot of meetings. They were sponsored by a particular Roman Catholic church there, and folks who gathered were largely interested in housing, but we went to talk about transportation as well, and started to try to listen to what people's needs were. And they described the challenges of many of the streets in that particular neighborhood. The next slide shows you what the streets are like. In fact, the only place where you can walk is out in the street, because the nature of a slope of a steeply sloped street means that the sidewalks, if they're going to give access to the parking that's at the front of each house, become a whole series of steps. So what we suggested after talking with people, what they came up with really as an idea is the next slide, which is to take their house plots and their plants and put them out in the street and just take over a third of the street, narrow the space that was available to the cars, and put the rest of it as the continuous walking surface. That means you could bike and walk. And why would you want to do that? The next slide shows why. You want to get to the shops that are at the bottom of the street there, which is also where you get the bus to go to work somewhere else. But if those shops are something that are easily accessible, then the need to get on a bus to go all the way into downtown and all the way back just to get your basic supplies, if the clinic, if the school were someplace you could walk to, then the neighborhood gets to solve many of its challenges by itself. Government needs to enable it, but people can take on some of these solutions themselves if they get together to do it with some cooperation by the government. And I think now in days of COVID, we're going to have to think of ways of solving problems with less money. So that means there's going to be less public money and there's less private money. Money spent on automobiles in the United States, it's $10,000 a year spent to keep an automobile running, buying it, gas, insurance, and so forth. In the United States, that's $2.5 trillion of private money that's being spent on automobiles every year. If we were spending that money on getting people around by public means, the bus, then we'd have a lot more money left in people's pockets to pay for better education, to pay for better food, to pay for better housing, and all the other things that people desperately need. Now, your equation is going to be a little differently, because the movement is not just to getting a car, it's to getting a two-wheeler. And to be able, but you're still buying gasoline. That money is still going out of India the second it's paid at the pump buying the gasoline. And so I think that there are still legitimate ways of thinking about how do we, in times of less money, spend it more wisely, both public money and private money. And that means solutions that people can figure out themselves. That's where I come back to this idea of towns or villages, because folks together in smaller groups are better able to organize than they are, I believe, if they are trying to do so citywide. And the next person who's worried about the same thing is in the next part of town, and is in an office somewhere else. So I do think there's some value in the looking each other in the eye. That's harder to do with a mask on and all the rest. But at the same time, there are chances of getting traffic to slow down, getting people to actually accommodate all the folks in the space, rather than just the car drivers who, if they've got dark windows, you can't even see when you're standing there about to get run over.
Yes. Okay. So Leo, are you showing the slides now?
I think that all got sent off to, let's see, who was it? It was,
So should I run through?
Karthik took care of it, I think.
Leo, how are we doing with time?
I think we have to wrap up in
Yeah.
about 10 minutes, I would say.
So, Rukameer, are you done, or what is it happening? I'm not very sure sitting here.
Well, I think that you need to make sure that there's a chance for other people to talk, and that you won't have the opportunity to go on forever. Of course, I can show slides forever, but I'm not. I think it's more important that.
What was the previous slide? What was the previous slide? There was a book cover I saw. What is that?
Yeah, this is mental speed bumps. This is an absolutely crazy man in Australia who proposes that you take over the street by changing the attitudes of the people who live along the street to make it theirs rather than make it belong to the people who are driving down it. So he says the answer that he did on his own street in, I think it was Melbourne, was to move, everybody on the street got together and they moved their dining tables out into the middle of the street one evening. And so they ate dinner in the middle of the street.
Oh, okay.
It's a little bit like, yes, I'll send the kids out in front of the autonomous vehicles and let them play soccer. And
Incidentally, that image has even reached me through some WhatsApp forward. See how fast these ideas
that's
move.
wonderful. That's wonderful. Anyway,
okay.
I think that you're right on. Das was right on target when he said that persuasion is essential as part of enabling, and that can not only be something that we do all the time, it can be something that we do temporarily. We can have the badminton game happening there right after work, but it doesn't need to happen all the time. And so we can have people going to the shops and then also get the delivery to the shops in the van, which is a good way to get the deliveries.
Okay. Well, so thanks on those comments, and maybe I'll pick that word you mentioned about persuasion, which originally Das spoke. So if I can connect what all four of you spoke and with this little word, even about cycling, after Leo asked me to moderate, I called upon 2-3 of my into cycling. One of them, incidentally, Vimala Swami, she's into sports, as not as a daily cycling, but as sports. I spoke with people from citizens from Bangalore and a couple of others. So one issue which a few people told me is this. Now, DULT, of course, we already have heard they have come up with this new mobility plan, and in the recent years, we have been hearing a lot more emphasis about the cycling. In the second webinar also, this was discussed about how some of the city buses will have cycle racks in the back. But then are we persuading people to do the cycling? There was a time when a whole lot of school children were into cycling. Today they think it's not really the best of the idea to do cycling. It's related to the fact that it is not safe. So parents also don't feel like sending their children by cycle nowadays. So keeping this in mind, first I would like to check with Shamant to see if I know he's not the government in the real sense, but adult, while they come in DULT, when they're coming up with all these policies, I would like to hear from Shamant, what are the measures the experts and the government is taking to ensure people are persuaded, people are, they should take pride in cycling, right? So is the government planning anything on those lines? Would like to hear from him. And then, of course, I would also like to hear from Dasarathi in what way this walking and cycling can be promoted in his opinion. He's already shared a few thoughts, but can we have Shamant first on this, please?
Sure. Can I just show a couple of slides?
I don't know how much time we would have for slides.
Okay,
but
fine.
We can try. Would like to hear the policy statement by the government.
Okay.
Are we really trying to?
No,
it's
no.
Okay to have a report and have suggestions, but what next?
True. See, there are many efforts, as the Shruti was telling. It's not just about enabling, but it's also about persuasion. So there's one such effort that has been happening since 2013, almost 7 years now, that, the government, the community, and various NGOs have come together and formed an informal association called BCOS. And that has been driving something called as a cycle days. Currently, we have this happening in about 40 communities in Bangalore, and it happens in one or other place in every Sundays. Obviously, now due to COVID, we are not able to have these cycle day programs, but we have reached out to about 40 neighborhoods, and we have community partners that are driving these awareness programs. So we are closing down a street in a particular neighborhood, for the first half of the day. And they're basically allowing people to experience the streets, to give a message that the streets belong to the people. We have various programs like, cycling. There are many people who are coming, they're first time cycling people. They're trying out, we give cycle rentals. So DULT sponsors the cycle rentals in these programs. So there are a lot of people who are picking from there. They want to learn cycling. They're having a small, cycling kiosk or cycle repair kiosk where people bring and fix their broken cycles they've not used for many years. So these kind of campaigns we have been doing for the past 7 years. It's one of the longest running cycling campaign anywhere in the country. They did for some time in, I think, somewhere in the New Delhi Rahagiri. But what this Bangalore cycle is probably the longest one.
Even my layout, ISRO layout where I live, we have had a cycle day.
Exactly. We have a larger version called Open Days. Obviously, it's not happened as often as we wanted to, but we closed down the entire 7 sectors of HSR layout on one Sunday. And with great lot of help from the traffic police and citizen groups, we totally banned vehicular traffic movement from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Yes.
And in fact, we had that was a time when Ganesha festival was happening.
Yes.
So to our surprise, we had a bullock cart taking Ganesha for Visarjane. So
is it?
So as the Shri told, that was a perfect use of animal-driven cart,
Well, so in a way, DULT and the government, they are trying their level best to pursue it. Yes, it is definitely reaching some people. There's no doubt about it. And one thing we should say, I would also say that In the recent years, there has been a lot of discussion about mobility issues in Bangalore. And I can't compare, I don't know, but compared to earlier years, what is being promoted now in Bangalore, it is noticeable. I can't still say whether it's commendable and it is achieving all the results,
No.
but there is an
It's a
effort.
start. It's a start, I would say.
It's a start, I agree.
It's a
Now,
lot
if I
more
can
we
ask,
have to do.
if I may just, sorry, I'm just trying to, I'm not trying to cut you short. It's just that giving opportunity for more discussion, I'm doing this. Thus, what would you think these efforts which the government is trying to do towards cycling to begin with, or any other safe walking, etc., are you able to really see much impact on them? Or is it becoming like very spot fixing? Is it just like that, okay, there is a little problem here, we'll solve it, little problem there, we solve it? Is that it? Or is it really to you appears like comprehensive?
So far, it's been till very recently, it's been mainly enabling, and that's not worked. We've not done any persuasion.
Not yet.
We really want to do persuasion on a large scale, move people to sustainable transport. I have come to the conclusion that children are the answer. You know, children till the age of 16, I think you can't really have, I mean, you can't get a license, or is it 18? You can't get an automobile license. You can't drive an automobile. Something like 25% of our population is this age band. And children are already users of sustainable transport, right?
Yes,
when I'm going to school as a child, I have to walk to the bus, take a bus to school, and right at the last mile again, I have to walk to school. So I'm already a forced user for the first 16 or 18 years of my life of sustainable transport. And children have huge blackmail power. I've found that when I try to promote this, I used to go to schools and talk to children and so on. So
well, at least some effort is there which is visible.
Yeah, but there's one particular thing, like, we should take that as an example. Stopping the use of firecrackers in Deepavali started in a single school in Delhi, one single school in Delhi, and then it spread like wildfire across the city, right? Yeah. I mean, across the city and then across the country.
Yes.
So we should do the same thing with sustainable transport. Use children.
I fully agree. And there are some interesting comments coming.
Child labor, right?
Absolutely agreed. And the child is a sensitive matter, of course. Yeah. So there are interesting comments coming on the chat box as well. And I think let me also try to pick up a few as we go along. And accordingly, I will ask either of the, depending on the panelists. There's something interesting here. The city planning must emphasize keeping the ecosystem of city and not just human being. Nandini's, there are one or two comments by Nandini. I'll just read it out. So she does say that it's important to change our lifestyle, which everybody is now saying, but it's equally important for the state to enable this change of lifestyle. Now I'm going to ask Mayor about this. A lot of people do say that the new lifestyle which the whole world is now going through, and we have heard it many times. We have heard it. Every Chinese wants to lead an American life, and then we need 4 Earths or 5 Earths. So what's happening there? Is there an effort from the state to enable, to facilitate this path of transformation for people to go back and change their lifestyle? Because one thing is true. Most of what we are discussing today, even now, about safety and the accessibility, affordability, they are not problems in singular phenomena. They are part of the larger whole. If you have to discuss only safety, we are just trying to spot fix, it will nothing will really happen. So what is a larger scenario? Anyway, back in US, do you see, or in other countries you worked, is the government systems trying to work in the direction and enable the people to lead a simpler life?
I think that if we take European examples, we might get more things that make us smile than American examples, because it does seem to me that the effort, the things changed starting in the 70s, even 60s in Denmark, in the Netherlands, then on in Germany, were something that said, not only are children dying, but we can't afford the automobile as something that we can provide for in the rush hour to get to work and get back. We can afford it for going off on a vacation with the whole family in the station wagon if you want to, but that isn't the way we're going to be able to get people to work. And so the government set about in Copenhagen to take away 2% of the on-street parking spaces every year. And the man who did that retired in, I think it was 2005, having been working since 1970 for 35 years. And he had taken away 70% of the on-street parking spaces in Denmark and turned it over, in Copenhagen, and turned it over to bus lanes and to bicycles. So that was something that was initially, well, we want our people to be more healthy. We want them to bicycle, not be in the car where they get fat. They're going to get exercise. We want them to save money, and we can't afford to go to either the government part of the costs of the driving or the private costs of the driving. And so we're going to change things. So I think it has to be a hand in glove. But you got to change people's minds. And that's where doing things temporally, this idea of, yes, we're going to have bicycling every Sunday morning as they do in Bogota and have for 40 years. And 1 million out of 8 million people on Sunday mornings are out on their bicycles. People from poor neighborhoods riding through rich neighborhoods, people from rich neighborhoods riding through poor neighborhoods. Another million are selling things along the street, fixing bicycle tires, giving you snacks and fresh fruit and so forth. Those things are really changing the minds about how bicycling can be important for every part of society.
But these are not government initiatives. These are by the people themselves.
Well, it's both.
Oh, both. All right. Okay.
It's both. It's both. I mean, in New York, when they tried to do this, and they've done it several days during each year, the policemen are so against it, and they are just, they have to go out there. They get paid overtime to be there to stop the traffic, and they do so with a scowl, and they don't welcome you. And it's really that part of government, the police, who make you feel like you're being a criminal by riding your bicycle down the street. Whereas in Bogota, it is almost all volunteers who are out there. Yes, there are a couple of policemen, but they are the ones who put out the barricades, who wave you goodbye, hello, goodbye as you're riding by, and encouraging the folks to be there and fix your tire and so forth. So this has to be cooperative, and that's where the whole idea of Black Lives Matter is saying, we got to talk to the people. Not in a way, what you say, driving the cars, we got to talk to the people who could be the bicycle riders who now are not being served.
In a way, what you say also echoes with what, there's a comment here by Shyam Sundar. He says, townships should be insisting on cycling and walking. By townships, I hope he means administration and the governance and all of them. So that the car menace can stop there. It's very true, Shyam Sundar. I think everyone would agree with you. There's also an interesting point about Vasant Mysore Math, who's an avid, he's very concerned citizen. He talks about how much space every car needs and the total area. You know, the idea of, and in India, of course, we have on-street car parking as a very common phenomena. So somebody who can afford the car also gets a road space for free, which is actually
exactly. We have in
by everybody.
We have in the United States.
That problem is there everywhere.
4 parking spaces for every car. That means 250,000 cars, 250 million cars for 200 million drivers, and 1 billion parking spaces.
Yes.
But see, it will happen.
But this change will happen only when people realize. You also did mention it was both government and the people. So people also have to realize, and we have to change our lifestyle. It's a point well taken. And the city planning also has to look at it as from an expert point of view. Shaman spoke about it, and they've been doing it. We know he himself did say in the beginning, we don't know why many of these ideas have not been implemented yet. So that's something to be looked at more critically. Where are we going slow in our implementation policies over here? Nandini, I want to ask you one. Leo, are you in?
Yeah, I am in.
It's already 6 o'clock.
It's frozen.
It's already 6, time to close, I know.
So I think we should wind up.
Yeah. Nandini has been sharing a lot of her recent thoughts on the chat box, so maybe I want to ask her about that part. But I'm just taking a clue from what most of you people have said And from my side, the one thing appears to be very common, and we have seen it in India a lot. If you want to have a people-friendly city, we need to have city-friendly people. What do we mean by saying city-friendly people? If I am friendly with somebody, I care for them, I would love them, I'll care for them. Being friendly is a way to connect. So if I'm in Bangalore, can I say I connect to Bangalore? Or in a more rhyming way, I can say, do I belong to Bangalore? BBB. The BBB is here for bus, but I'm just using the word, do I belong to Bangalore? Do I connect to Bangalore? If I do, then I would love Bangalore, I would care for Bangalore, then I will be a Bangalore friendly person. So when we say, safe cities, safe walking, mobility, it all comes back to that. Cities, there was a point which Hemant mentioned, yes, cities are the engines of growth. They have become engines of growth, they have become speculation machine, because we are looking at city like that. And again, back to Nandini's Kannada poem, she says, we are extracting. If I want the city to benefit me, of course, I'll also be in the same line. It has to be the other way. I should give back to city, or at least it should be equal. Give and take should be equal, if not unequal completely. So I think if you start looking at it, a safe city would really mean, yes, of course, a people-friendly city, which means there should be city-friendly people. And that's where the word persuasion also comes. At large, if you look at, if you are in a position to educate people, like me included, and when I'm saying educate people, is not me and them. All of us are together in this. So if that can happen, really. But then my comment against government is this: most of the work which government does typically are tenderable projects. There will be a budget so that it can be then measured, bills can be paid. If you look at the amount of money the government spends on awareness building, even look at the government budget on education is reducing. Government budget on culture is reducing. Whereas we have to spend more money on bringing about awareness. Without that, it's difficult to implement our ideas. So it was good that these opportunities and this opportunity today gave me also a chance to rethink on these ideas, Leo. You invited me and I'm very happy to be part of this. It has helped me to refresh many thoughts and add on more thoughts. So with that, I will hand over my role of moderator, conclude that role with thanks to everybody, and I will ask Leo to take over from here.
Thank you so much, Satya, because you did an incredible job in a very, very complex set of issues that came through, and very, very rich discussion. And you managed to do it so well with the problems we had with technology. It shows that sometimes, as Nandini said, it gets to a point where technology cannot help us. We need to get back to meeting, and I'm hoping Ken can come here and have his masala dosa and coffee. Come on, I mean, what's the point of saying we are part of one world if we can't meet?
I know.
Yeah. So we're going to do that very soon. We are going to tell Corona to go away very fast. We're going to bang some thalis, and next Sunday, all the the Corona is going to go away. On that note, I must.
You're right. You're right. It starts with people, and that's what it's all about.
Exactly. When the Prime Minister says Corona go away, it doesn't happen. We should say it. So it's going to happen next Sunday, and that said, I think the series continues next week, next Friday. And one of the key themes that came out, and Shamant raised it, was, and he admitted that the bus fares are not accessible to all. So we're going to actually look at not just the bus fares not being affordable, but also how to make public transport affordable. And a good friend and fellow activist, and who's also a promoter of bus riding in in Bangalore in particular, Vinay Srinivasa will be moderating the panel, and we are hoping to have as rich a discussion as we have had today. And I welcome everyone who was part of this and the earlier webinars to rejoin. We also spread the word so other friends and people can join. And this webinar, unfortunately, could not be shared on Facebook. I think Mark Zuckerberg is blocking the person who made Zoom from connecting. We'll try and find another way to broadcast it, webcast it rather. But this video recording will be uploaded on YouTube and will be reshared. Those who registered will get it. So on that note, I want to thank Ken for joining us early in the morning.
I wanted to read out some of the comments sent in the chat box by people like Vinod
Can
and
we
others.
send it by? Can we?
There's
We're
not
planning
enough
to send it
time.
by email. We don't have
Yeah.
time. We're running over time.
Swaminathan,
Right.
Vinod
We'll
and
send it
others.
over. We'll
Please.
compile all of those, and the idea is at the end of this, we're going to also have a report. In any case, those chats will also be taken by my colleagues, and we'll make it as part of this day's report. Every time we have a webinar within the next 1 hour, we have a report coming out, and we share it. We'll share it with all of you as well. So really, yeah. So thank you, Ken. Thank you, Shamant, Nandini. Thank you very much, and Das definitely. You sat at home today. You didn't cycle to ESG, but you should cycle and come.
Yes.
We can have, a hot drink together.
Yes. You've been offering me a beer and a wine.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Satya.
Everybody,
Thank you,
it's been a joy to be with you. Thank you all.
I'll share your slides with everybody if you don't mind.
Sure.
Bye
Absolutely.
bye, Neo and all of.
Thank you, Nandini. Yeah.
Bye bye.
Nandini,
Thank you all so much.
Nandini, please send your poem for publication. It's really good.
Ah. Thank you, Satya. Yeah.
All right. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.